management guy. I just forget who shared this joke. He shared this on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
So he said that when I die, I want the developers to bury me so that they can let me down one last time. So the developer replies that at least this requirement is clearly understood, right? So product managers are always saying that if I had a better development team, I could have worked wonders. And the developers themselves are saying, yeah, your requirements are never clear, right? So
Yeah.
there is that constant tussle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Geek Nerder podcast. I am your host, Kaivalya Apte. And in this series, I am talking to leaders and experts in our industry to get key insights from their experience so we can all learn together. In this episode, we are going to talk about product management and everything around it, like why product management is important, why developers need to have that product mindset to be successful in their careers, and what is product management basically. And to answer all those questions, I have Maheep Bhalla with me, and he has been like a senior leader in the product management space for years. So I'll ask all those questions and try to get all these answers from his experience. And let's see how it goes. So, welcome, Maheep. Let's start with a brief introduction about your journey into product management and what you like about product management in general.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevalia. Very excited to be here. I love product management. It's a role that I consciously sought out.
Hmm.
Some folks talk about getting into product management accidentally.
Hmm.
I chose this line, right, and
Yeah.
and I love it. Uh, what I love about it is the tangibility of delivering a solution which
Hmm.
solves the user's problems,
Yeah.
right? And I work with so many other stakeholders. I work with engineering, of course, right? I call product and engineering the closest partners in crime.
Yeah.
So I work with engineering, I work with design, I work with finance, I work with so many of the other teams, and it is my job to ensure that the solution that gets delivered solves the user's problem, right? So
Hmm.
so I love that, and my journey has been kind of typical in a way. I used to be a software developer. I then realized that it's not just smart software which makes the world go round, right? It's
Yeah.
got to solve a customer problem.
Yeah.
And I had an MBA, and that's how I got into the line of product management, right? It truly brings technology and business skills together, right? It's
Hmm.
that one area.
Yeah.
And for folks who are listening in, uh, you know, Cavalier reached out. Cavalier, I'd been following his blog for a bit. He writes he writes very sane, very practical advice on what to do with software engineering. How can you scale your software engineering career? And when he launched this podcast, I said, why not talk about a topic which is dear to many product managers on how they can interact well with software engineers, and on the flip side, about telling software engineers about product managers as well, right? So here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm really excited that you accepted kind of my invite to have this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to this episode. So as you briefly covered, like product management is not only for product managers, it is
Hmm.
also for developers to be
Yeah.
successful in in their career in working on a product that becomes really successful and eventually solves a very critical customer problem.
Hmm.
So with that, let's start with, let's set up the stage for the
Yeah.
definitions. Like, what is product management?
Yeah. So it varies by company. I wish I could give you the one answer, but there
Hmm.
is none, right? It
Yeah.
Companies define it differently. However, it is also different from the role of a product owner or a program manager or a or a product marketing manager. They're all different roles. They've all
Yeah.
been broken out, right? Um, in software engineering, really, in building technology products, right? So we are going to be talking about this domain.
Yeah.
It really started with Microsoft, right? So Microsoft Pacific Northwest, later followed by Amazon, that you could consider that the heart of software product management. That role really is, in summary, that role really is defining what gets built,
Hmm.
what gets built first before other things. So prioritization, and how do we measure with what we built that it was effective, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are pieces. Some companies do some of it. Some companies will ask you to also take on the role of the agile coach,
Hmm.
not necessarily the remit of a product manager, but they are doing this role on the side.
Yeah.
Some roles are more technology oriented, some roles are more business oriented, right? So
Yeah.
if you talk about a company like a FANG company, right,
Mm.
they would say that it's more business. You're more market facing. You're Some of them call it an external facing product manager. Some of them call it an internal facing product manager. So various definitions. But I have found the two or three things that I talked about, which is defining
Hmm.
what gets made first before the other things, and then how do you measure with what you made, with what you built, whether it was successful. I think these things are common, right? they
Yeah.
they form the foundational framework, and then there are the other things which matter to the company, matter to the organization. If it's a younger organization, you wear more hats. If it's an older organization, one of the FANG companies, then their role is slightly more defined, right? In
Yeah.
a way, this is what you do, and this is what the other teams do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you rightly said, that it depends a lot on what kind of company you're working on, what is the domain, and also the size of the company. And product managers might require to wear like different types of hats and solve
Yeah,
different types of problems. But I
yeah,
think it boils down to problem solving in general and problem
yes,
solving for the customer. So,
yes, yes,
and also solving the right problem is really important and really critical in this domain. So we'll
yes.
come to that a bit later. If we have to, talk about product management, and
Mhm.
if someone wants to become like a product manager, and
Yes,
eh, someone is from a different background, let's say
yeah.
someone is a developer or someone is just like into like in this career very new, like how to
Mhm.
become like a successful product manager, and what are some traits that you have seen in your experience
Yeah.
that successful product managers have?
So that's a multi-part question.
Yeah.
Let me try to break, the things down. So number one, uh, what there is no typical journey into product management, right?
Mhm.
Just because I made the journey from a software engineer doesn't mean that everyone follows that journey.
Yeah.
We have had, classical arts graduates become product managers. We have had marketing graduates become product managers. We have of course had people from software. We have had people from, investment banking
Mm.
trying to become product managers, right? So there is, and with one of the product management career accelerators that I was a part of, we had people from literally all walks of life, right? Folks who started out, as I already said, classical arts history,
Mm.
marketing, social sciences. One of them came from the medicine field. They realized that they were burnt out, and then they wanted to do something with devices, right? They
Mm.
wanted to do something specifically with medical devices, so they wanted to be a product manager. So there is no one typical journey, right?
Yeah.
I mean, uh, let me clarify that,
Hmm.
right? So no one typical journey. Here are the things which I have found to be common, right?
Yeah.
Number one, and any blog will tell you that, any product management book that you read will tell you that. Can you place the user first, right?
Mm.
That's the one skill which is absolutely key. Can you place yourself in the user's shoes, right? Because the users are not always going to be present
Mm.
when the product is being developed. The users are going to be at an arm's length. For every little bit that you do, you are
Yeah.
not going to be able to reach out to the user, right?
Mm.
So the product manager stands in for the user when when the product is being made, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that you could also say is a responsibility. I talked about the three responsibilities. What gets made? Well, what gets made from a user's perspective?
Mm.
Can you do that translation? That translation is about skills that can be polished. That translation is about, not necessarily about skills which were taught to you in college or which you do a course to
Mm.
acquire, right?
Yeah.
That the ability to translate those skills you pick up on the job. You pick them up on any job, right?
Mm.
Whether you are in software, whether you are in marketing, in accounting, in finance, can you place yourself in the user's shoes? Very, very important.
Yeah.
The other thing, which is my perspective, and most blogs stop at users first, customers first, users first all the time, every time. Everybody will will tell you that, but the most blogs stop there.
Mm.
The second thing that I have learned in my journey, and especially as I became a product leader, so from a product manager, when I became a product leader, is can you help the company make money?
Mm.
Extremely, extremely important.
Yeah.
With the product that you are building, is it successful, right?
Mm.
Is it actually going to make money? What's the business sense of the product
Yeah.
is extremely important, right? The problem that you are solving, is it sustainable financially for the company,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Even non-profits need to make money,
Mm.
right? Even the most esoteric of organizations are there because they want some financial benefit out of it,
Yeah.
right? So where is the business leading you, right? You are with what you are doing, you're doing it for the user, and the user is going to pay you back. The user is going to buy your product or service. But is it sustainable? Are you just building a feature for the heck of it, or are you building a feature because it's going to solve a problem, and thereby it's going to turn the flywheel in a way that it's going to lead to repeat business, right?
Mm.
Extremely, extremely important skill. We don't expect anybody just getting into product management to
Yeah.
to be able to inherit the skill or to be able to internalize it.
Yeah.
But as you go on that journey, it's very, very important, right? Every company wants to make money. Every
Hmm.
company which employs you as a product manager, or you want your own startup, right? That's another very typical journey we could talk
Yeah.
about, that most product managers go from being product managers to product leaders to startup founders,
Mm.
to being like a CPO or a CEO. Many of them want to do that.
Yeah.
But what about the money, right? After putting the user first, did you make money? Extremely important skill to have.
Yeah.
If you have these two skills, the
Hmm.
other things can be read about, or the other things can be talked about, right?
Mm.
But ground your focus in these two skills: users first, and how sustainable is the problem that you're solving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have given like a very insightful answers, and there are like so many parts to it. So
Yeah.
you talked about putting the users first and like wearing those customer shoes and understanding the problem from their
Hmm.
perspective. So I remember in one of my previous companies when I was actually very closely working with customers, and I also attended some customer feedback calls and how they are testing our products and how they are using our products and what is their journey. So we used to create these so-called personas of different types of customers, like based on their region they are into, or their age, their choices, their order history, for example, because it was an e-commerce company. And we used to come up with a lot of different personas and try to fit in our product for solving the problem for their persona type. So are we solving the problem for, let's say, the majority of the customers, or are we also talking about like the 1% of the customers that might need like different features in our products? So and you also talked about sustainability, right? So
Hmm.
supporting those features in our products for those 1% customers that, let's say, are very picky, or let's say
Yeah.
they have really high expectations from the customers,
Yeah.
but it might not be very sustainable for the product.
Yes.
It might be very costly. So are
Yeah.
we solving for the majority of the users, or are we also solving for those 1% or even lower percentage of users that
Yeah.
need those features? So
Yeah.
I think we'll come back to that later when we try to prioritize features. But what are your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
So that's an excellent topic. We could probably spend an entire podcast with the way you broke it down, right? So
Yeah,
you brought up some very, very interesting things. We can would love to spend more time on it,
yeah,
right? Uh, The answer, as with many things in product management, is depends. It depends on the resources that you have. It depends on the life cycle that your product is in.
Hmm.
If your product is very, very mature,
Hmm.
and that 1% is still likely to mean a lift of millions of dollars, right? I'm looking in the direction of Microsoft and Microsoft Office.
Mhm.
If that 1% is still likely to represent a sizable chunk, if the
Yeah.
impact is likely to be huge, you'll care for
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
As a young startup, you may not. I would want to, right? I would want to. It's a product manager's job to care for their customers. But I also talked about prioritization. It may not be financially sustainable to cater to all those 1% of the features, right?
Hmm.
So you
Yeah.
put them in a backlog. There is a reason that you have a backlog.
Hmm.
And if that gathers scale, if that gathers, financial heft in a
Yeah.
way, right? You would want to care for it.
Yeah.
Other places, there may be a smaller set of users, but regulations may require you to cater to them,
Hmm.
right? Let's
Yeah.
not ignore the role of regulations in software. In some aspects, with medical industry, with fintech, in other aspects with EU regulations, you have to cater for privacy in a particular way, even
Yeah.
though there is a 1 in 1,000 users who may be walking down that path, but regulation forces you to, so you have to, right? And where it's visibility, where it's differently abled users, where you're trying to cater to them, you may want to, right?
Yeah.
And that depends on the way your product scales out, but it's always a constant prioritization churn. What features come up, what features fall behind, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about prioritization later.
Yeah.
But to summarize my answer to your question, you care for all the users, but resources and lifecycle determine that what users do you care for first and what
Hmm.
users do you care for later.
Yeah.
There is no, I cannot set it in stone. You constantly keep revisiting those priorities,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
A good product manager will be able to constantly revisit and will be able to constantly justify
Hmm.
why something became more prominent,
Yeah.
even though it catered to a few of the users, or why did it become prominent because it catered to 80% of the users, right?
Yeah.
We are constantly having those discussions.
Absolutely.
Great question, by the way. I mean, as I said, I could go on and on about it.
Absolutely. I mean, this
Yeah,
is so vast topic, and I also
yeah,
love like talking about products and an approach to solve customer problems. So we can
yeah.
go on and on with different topics there. But with this, I want to share one experience. So as you said, that it depends on what kind of customer that 1% is representing. So
Hmm.
I was working for a company who was into ebooks business, and then like it was all working great, and like customers were happy with the way it was working. But then there was one customer who was really like kind of angry with the way it worked for them, and that customer was J.K. Rowling. And
Hmm.
uh, that tells you like, okay, that
Yeah,
if that one customer is really
yeah,
huge, you might want to
yeah.
also prioritize that.
Yes, yes.
So it depends. As you said, the answer is not very clear, but it depends.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that is a very good point. And you also talked about prioritization, but we'll
yeah,
cover that a bit later. Um,
yeah. So
I
let
also
me talk about the J.K. Rowling kind of stuff. So when we
yeah
come to prioritization, I'll put that in the parking lot, and I'll address it. I'll
yeah
address about the squeaky wheels, and that always happens.
hmm
And I don't want to just throw prioritization frameworks out there. They need to match to the
hmm
kind of the stage in the life cycle that the company is in.
yeah awesome. Okay, so with this, I want to move slightly to the how developers, or
Yeah.
let's say how developers look at product management. And
Mm-hmm.
I just want to share one experience where there was a developer who changed his career into product manager, and he
Mm-hmm.
was like really into product. So the point I'm trying to make is, as you said, there's no one path to become a product manager. Like
Yes.
people from multiple background, multiple domains can become product managers. So in my experience, I have seen uh, like wide range or wide variety of product managers. Some
Mm-hmm.
of them were really like highly technical, so they used to code in their previous lives or previous
Mm-hmm.
careers. So
Mm-hmm.
they continued doing that, and they had like really like deep technical knowledge. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of asking for, let's say, small features to the customer, they might just create pull requests and ask the developers for feedback. On the other
Yeah.
hand, I have worked with product managers that were really like into the business. They had like
Mm-hmm.
so much business and domain knowledge. They understood
Mm-hmm.
the customer's problem very well, but they were not
Mm-hmm.
very deep into the technical implementation and how like technology is working.
Yeah.
So if I have to become like a product manager or someone
Mm-hmm.
who is new to this field, where do
Mm-hmm.
we set this boundary? Like how deep a product manager should go into technicalities of a product?
Yeah. So that's another great question. There is no one right answer, and the answer is it will depend, right?
Yeah.
It will depend on the needs of the company. But let me
Mhm.
try to unpack it, right? Let me try to bring in my experience over here.
Yeah.
Uh, you may be able to thrive in technology,
Mhm.
and that endears you to certain kinds of roles in product management. Some
Yeah.
companies have rules of technical product managers, right?
Yeah.
We will help define, for instance, in an Amazon or in a company, let's say, which is starting on its cloud journey, and we did some of that at Sears, right?
Yeah.
Where you will have product managers coming in, bringing in their business skills,
Mhm.
but they understand what are the pieces in the cloud journey, right? I mean, do you lift and shift first? Do you set up a cloud pipeline?
Yeah.
What pieces fall into place? They care
Mhm.
to understand some of those things, and thereby they become more technical.
Yeah.
With the example that you gave of the person who would check in code, they were probably comfortable.
Yeah.
They had spare cycles, right? However, given that more and more has been given to product management and many companies understand this role,
Yeah.
they are always pegged, right? Their utilization is always pegged at maximum or next to maximum, right? They,
Mhm.
they need to be thinking, just like developers can't afford to be so busy that they are always reactive. You got to have the time to look at your code. You always have to take the time to look at your code and see if it did better. If
Mhm.
you're only reacting, right? I worked with the company early on in my career. I think the second or the third company that I worked with, we were working, and I say this carefully. This is me being informal. We were working 60 hours a week. It was a little sweat like code coolie shop in India that a US organization was running. We still got shouted at. We were just reacting, right? We
Mhm.
were just like we had to do a piece of code. We did it. We never cared to think of the of the fall through or of the detailed impact.
Yeah.
Don't be in that mode. Now, as product managers, we need to be able to think. We need to
Mhm.
be able to go outside of the domains of what we did, our daily meetings,
Mhm.
and take time to think of the product. Now, with the spare hours that we have left, if solving that one bug or doing that one pull request makes you happy, you think
Mhm.
that will have a marked improvement in the quality of the product, by all means. But
Mhm.
I will challenge that. If you think that is so important,
Mhm.
right? Why did it not go? Why did it not bubble up on your roadmap,
Yeah.
right? Right. So I mean, I'm with due respect to that person, what I'm trying to say is, if it was hurting so many users, how come you were not able to make the case as a product manager
Yeah.
to bubble that up and to have somebody do it? Now, I've
Mhm.
done some of that, right? I'm comfortable pulling reports on my own. I'm comfortable dealing with the reporting tools, and rather than wait on a reporting team, right?
Mhm.
I worked with a big organization. We would generate formal requests for reports. We would get that report. I got comfortable after a while pulling reports
Mhm.
on my own, right? But
Yeah.
the end use was getting to the product idea faster, getting to
Mhm.
the product featureization faster, right?
Yeah.
Getting to the product feature prioritization faster, right? So it is in the remit of what the role calls for, right?
Mhm.
If you are so pegged that all you can do is product management, all you can do is, and you sometimes you don't get to do enough of it because you're convincing people as to what the value of the product would be. So if you get to do that and you want to do that as a hobby, why not,
Yeah.
right? I like to tinker. I like to set up the best, network that I have, like my own VPN, my own switches. I like to do that. I have that level of skill, but then I don't take it to work, right?
Mm.
It's something that I do as a hobby, and then I draw a line there,
Yeah.
right? But let me also now, and again, long topic, but that's why you hear me talking. But technical skills do help, right?
Yeah.
So I started by saying that draw a line. However, let's say you started with a non-technical background, but
Mm.
you are getting into technology. You're getting into building technology products, not just consumer products or devices. You're getting into building technology products.
Mm-hmm.
A knowledge of technology will definitely help,
Yeah.
right? How do you acquire that? You acquire that by reading. You acquire that by caring to spend 30 minutes with the engineer or the architect saying, I may not understand all of it, but can you at least explain me the architecture,
Yeah.
right? So when the engineer then talks about that this is a NoSQL database or this is a JSON object, you know the difference. When the
Yeah.
engineer talks about this is a REST API versus this is a queue, you know the difference, right?
Yeah.
Because they are going to have a bearing on the product.
Mm-hmm.
So my my viewpoint, and this is just my viewpoint,
Yeah.
where I draw the line is I care to understand the big pieces and how they are coming together.
Mm.
I care to understand how things are being built in the cloud because they are going to have a bearing. All of these things are going to have a bearing on the scalability or the flexibility of your product,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because at a point in time, one of my projects started to talk about a one repo, right? So the developers wanted to carve out time, 20% of every sprint. That's a sizable chunk to
Mm.
migrate to a one repo, right? I don't check in code. I couldn't fathom the use of it, but I care to sit down. I care to sit
Mm.
down with the developers and I said, why is one repo important?
Yeah.
Right? I understood 50% of what they said, but they were able to convey it in a way. It's
Mm.
participating. Right? So let me reel this back in. Right? I went deep into the weeds with my examples with whatever I said. Let me reel this back in. Right?
Yeah.
Some roles will require you to be more technologically able than the others.
Mm.
However, a vast majority of the product roles don't. A vast
Mm.
majority of the product roles don't require you to check in code,
Yeah.
right? You will not be affected. If a role says Python product manager should be able to code in Python, you don't know Python, don't waste your time. There are so many other product roles out
Yeah.
there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a vast majority of the product roles will require you to do product.
Mm.
That's the thing. I stand by it. So first principle that I'm giving you is roles will require you to do product, focus on product skills.
Mm.
The second thing that I will also tell you related to that is an understanding of technology
Mm.
will facilitate your work, will allow you to make better decisions, will allow you to ask better questions about trade offs. So, even though you start by not being technologically capable, you
Mm.
start by not understanding all of it, care to learn about it.
Mm.
Just like you care to tell your developers and developers understand about business, they ask questions about users. Similarly, for a better working relationship, care to understand about technology,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
focus on your role because that's the role that you are being paid to do. Be the product manager,
Mm.
number one, but number two, care to understand about technology. And
Yeah.
then depending on the company, there will always be the spectrum. You'll be closer to technology because you will be you'll be defining the cloud, architecture, what gets built first, what gets built later, or you may
Mm.
completely be in the business side and you leave it, you leave it to somebody else to divvy up those pieces and, relate to the technology team, right?
Absolutely.
Does that help, Kevalia? I mean, I wanted to
Absolutely. I
make sure that
think
I summarize it.
no, I think you actually very beautifully explained like kind of the pros and cons of both approaches, like being very
Yeah,
technical and not technical. And so I think the summary of what you said is basically like focus on the role first and what
yeah,
it requires from you. And
yeah,
then, of course, if you have knowledge, if you have, technical expertise, that is going to help you if you're working on a, like
yes.
a technical company. So,
I think that's
I
very well summarized. Yes.
Yeah, and I think you also briefly touched kind of the relationship between developers and product managers and
Yes.
how like collaboration is important. So my next
Yes.
question is basically around that. So I've seen,
Yes.
like, at least in my experience, I have seen like developers sometimes like to work in isolation,
Hmm.
and this is where it gets really tricky, like for both
Hmm.
sides, like product management and developers. So developers want like kind of less interference in whatever they are doing,
Yes.
and product managers want developers to work on features what according to them is like high priority. uh,
Yes.
and there needs to be some collaboration and some kind
Yeah.
of a good relationship
Yeah.
to make the product successful.
Yeah.
So how or what can developers do to
Yeah.
first like build that product mindset? Because
Yeah.
if you don't have that product mindset, you might code like day in day out, but you might not be able to communicate in the sense that like non developers also understand what you're trying to say, and
Yeah.
also you might not be able to make that impact. You might not even grow in your career beyond a certain limit. So
Yeah.
what can developers do to build that product mindset, and
Yeah.
what can developers do to effectively work with product managers to kind of make this
Yeah.
collaboration fruitful?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started smiling when you were answering that question. Again, it's a long question, so bear with me.
Yeah,
I'll take a few minutes to answer that. But
absolutely.
let me start with a joke. So I think this is one prominent product management guy. I just forget who shared this joke. He shared this on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
So he said that when I die, I want the developers to bury me so that they can let me down one last time. So the developer replies that at least this requirement is clearly understood, right? So product managers are always saying that if I had a better development team, I could have worked wonders. And the developers themselves are saying, yeah, your requirements are never clear, right? So
Yeah,
there is that constant tussle.
yeah.
But leaving that joke aside, leaving that one joke aside, it's true, it's ironic, it's also funny. Uh, Product and developers, along with design, are the closest partners in crime, right?
Hmm.
Let's no make no bones about the fact,
Yeah.
right? The other roles may be very internal facing or very external facing. They're talking to the customers, like marketing, like sales, business
Yeah.
development, senior leadership. They're very external facing, or accounting, finance may be very internally focused, right?
Hmm.
But product is a role which is bringing all of them together,
Hmm.
and then engineering is supposed to deliver against that, right? So
Hmm.
so you're working together makes every sense to cultivate this relationship, right?
Hmm.
If
Yeah.
you'll never start by being effective on day one, right? So as I
Absolutely.
said, the answer is it depends. Take time to build this relationship. Take time to understand what works for you.
Hmm.
Sometimes the organization will help you. Sometimes the organization will say, hey, we have this set of tools. We work in agile, we work in safe, we work in such and such, we use such and such tools. But at the end of the day, uh, here are some principles that work for me as a product manager. Let me give you my side of the story, and I'll try
Hmm.
to bring in the engineer side of the story.
Yeah.
The first foundational thing that tries to work that has worked for me is I try to bring in developers as upstream as possible. And it just doesn't mean developers, because sometimes they're very busy. Sometimes the senior devs may be very busy, the middle level devs may be very busy. So
Yeah.
I'll bring in the architect, I'll bring in the engineering manager or the engineering director, right?
Hmm.
I so product ideas will always be flowing around. I call it the fount of product ideas, right? Users, backlog. Somebody went to a conference, a senior leader went to a conference. Somebody picked up the phone and called up a senior leader and said, hey, why don't you do this? There will always be a fount of product ideas, and there should be a healthy fount of product ideas, right?
Yeah.
You don't engage, you don't waste the engineering team's time with every little idea that comes up. But let's say that there is an idea where you think it has merit, and as
Hmm.
a product manager, you're stage gating that.
Hmm.
You're not involving the engineering team. You're preserving their cycles in a way.
Hmm.
So when you think an idea has merit, bring them upstream, right? Bring
Hmm.
them as upstream as possible. Tell them, This is what is coming down the pipe. Be aware of it. I don't want you to start estimating. I don't want you to start breaking it down or do what you have to.
Yeah.
But this is something that may come up. What are your thoughts about it? So even before I go talk to the other parties about something like this, I've given them an idea, right?
Mm.
And remember, I carefully said the senior part of it. If it's a young organization and you have only two developers, both the developers ought to know.
Yeah.
If it's a organization where I'm working with 50 people there, I'm only going to tell the architects and the engineering directors,
Yeah.
right? And they will do the translation. So to your point, the developers like to be left alone. They will go do the translation. Which of those developers who's sitting in that dark cave, their dark room, needs to know about it, and who does not, right?
Yeah.
So you do that, right? You bring them in upstream. That obviously works. The second thing is, when I am building the roadmap, when I'm putting together the product roadmap, and I have prioritization and I'm putting my rationale together, why are we
Mm.
building it? I always democratize it, right?
Mm.
So if a developer has a question, why are we doing this? Or a developer needs to see where do the big pieces fit together. They
Mm.
don't have to. And by the way, the way I mentor and coach my team, and Kevin, you would have seen that in in Sears and also in Sears Pune. I tell them that I want to be able to take a vacation, and I don't want to be called when I'm on vacation, and I want all of you to do that as well.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that will help you do that? Some of the things that will help you do that is democratize the information. Use wiki, use whatever tool you have to
Yeah.
publish it, right?
Yeah.
That knowledge shouldn't only sit in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So that roadmap that we together agreed upon with engineering, at least a backlog, what stays in the backlog, needs to be a public document that anybody on the team can access, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say the developer is sitting there, they're sitting alone, then they have a question about how does this tie into something else that I may be doing? How does
Mm.
it retire into 20% technical debt that I'm retiring? What impact will it have on the platform? What impact will it have on the API or the performance? They can always go look at that democratized document, that repo, that SharePoint, whatever you have. They can look at that, and it's never in doubt,
Yeah.
right? The third thing, right? The third principle. So again, tracing back the principles, bring them upstream, bring them up as upstream as possible. Democratize information. And the third thing is make yourself available,
Yeah.
because there will always be healthy back and forth.
Mm.
Trust me, I am yet to write, or I've written very few user stories which were accepted the way they were and nobody had any questions, right?
Yeah.
I started writing user stories. I bring in, the engineering team. We groom them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you should be able, as a product manager, I should be receptive to their ideas. And as engineers, they are often pretty open with what should be there and what shouldn't be there,
Mm.
right? I mean, of course, I'm not going to write engineering tasks or engineering chores into stories. That's what the developers do themselves. That's what they're better suited to do. But my stories get built participatively. The only time I only own the user story is when it's a stub. When it's assigned to me, when it's a stub.
Mm.
Anytime after that, anybody else can come and comment on it. They can clarify. They can change it. They can feel free to make more inputs into it.
Yeah.
Right. That's how you involve them.
Yeah.
And even when the user story is created, only 10% will be implemented as such without questions, right? There will always be questions. The
Mm.
third principle is to get that channel going. And you were sharing vignettes. Let me share a vignette. I went into an interview and somebody said, "Hey, we have a very pedantic implementation of agile." And I'm like, probably you already lost me there. I mean, the operative word is agility. How can it be pedantic? How can it be by the book,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, well, engineers should only be asking product managers questions in stand-ups. And I'm like, let me cut this short here. I don't think I'm a fit for your organization,
Yeah.
right? Because my
Mm-hmm.
developers ping me on Slack, Teams,
Yeah.
whatever tool you have. They will
Mm.
send me emails. They will call me into a huddle. They are having an engineering huddle. They'll invite me into that engineering huddle for 5 minutes to answer questions.
Yeah.
There is always back and forth. You don't
Mm.
arrive at that back and forth on day one. you arrive at that healthy relationship over a period of time,
Yeah.
right? Remember, they are successful for the outcome of the vision that you had. You laid out a
Mm.
vision, they are going to be executing against that vision. It's a relationship that a product manager has to cultivate, right? So I
Yeah.
talked about those principles very quickly. Let me try to talk about the flip side from an engineering perspective, or the engineering side for those principles, right? And I'll try to cover it in 2 minutes or so.
Yeah.
When you are a developer, you are going to be busy. You will have
Mm.
pull requests. You're going to be working with pipelines, how to set up pipelines. They're often confusing. They change. You're going to be very very little of a part of you will be dedicated towards actually building out the feature, right?
Mm.
And when you want to build a feature, you just want to build the feature.
Yeah.
But again, remember, why are you doing that? You
Mm.
are in software not just you want because you want to make software. In you're writing software because it is solving somebody's problem, right?
Yeah.
And you're getting paid for it.
Mm.
If you remember that, you will care to ask the questions, right? Care to ask these questions, build these relationships, and say, can you tell me why are we doing this, or when are we going to do that? I think this has value. When you have a voice, say it. Some of our best backlogs have come from QAs where they ask, what about this? But what about this? And
Mm.
how is this related? Some of our best backlog, artifacts have also come from developers where they say, I think there could be a better way of doing this. We may not have the resources to do this now, but we will do it in the future, right? You together are responsible for the success of the product.
Mm.
You work with the product manager to create the business value around it, but you together try to make the best product that is there, right? I mean,
Mm.
you're responsible for it together. Let me iterate that. Let me reiterate that fact again, right?
Yeah.
So care to get in more upstream, care to understand why this is, sometimes care to look at the backlog. You
Yeah.
may not be able to do it every week, but once every 15 days, once at the beginning of every sprint, when there is sprint intake happening, and they say, okay, this is what we are going to build,
Mm.
care to understand that,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that talks about the first two things. And work do your part of the work to make sure that your relationship with the product manager is open, is participative, right? Only the product
Absolutely.
manager can't do that, only you can't do that, right?
Exactly.
So I'm not going to put the onus on the developer saying that, hey, your product manager doesn't have time and you are making all the efforts. Together make the efforts to make it more
Yeah.
participate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Remember, I mean, you are going back to the first principles. You are building a product which is solving the user problem. The
Mm.
product manager understands about the user, ask the questions, ask
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
right? So
Absolutely.
again, I went into it, like from various angles, but I wanted to bring it back and try to answer it from an engineer's perspective as well. I hope
Absolutely.
I hope that I was able to
I
do that.
think, yeah, I think you have covered like many good points, like from your experience. And I really think it will help a lot. It will add a lot of value to like developers who think that, development is just about coding and I shouldn't be, interfered by any other task. And I think it boils down to communication and being open, being available for others. Like it's ultimately it's you're on the same team. You're working with a product manager. It's not like a different team. You're on the same team. You're solving the same problem. And what I've seen in my experience is many developers focus on a lot of like how to solve the problem and what is the
Hmm.
problem, but they
Hmm.
they kind of miss the why part of it, like why we are doing it. And I
Yeah,
think product managers need developers to ask those questions, because as you said,
yeah,
it's like an iteration. Like you
yeah,
don't get like things perfect right from the beginning. You need some inputs from like different types of people, like because they think differently. Like developers might have a different point of view. So I think it's really important that developers start asking those why kind of questions.
yeah,
And also this, I think this brings this approach to development. Like think about why you're doing something, and not just a what and how, because what and how is usually very interesting. That,
Yeah,
oh, how I want to solve this problem, there are like
yeah,
100 different ways. I want to do it in a like best possible way. There are so many technical challenges, and I think developers kind of get distracted into those two questions and forget about the why. And with that, I want to share one little experience where this happened. That we started working on a feature, and the product managers like thought that, okay, this feature is going to like be very useful for the customers. We worked for on that feature. Like, no one really asked like, why are we doing this? What is there for the customer? And we built that solution, and I was also part of it. I was like, I did not ask that question, I just worked on a ticket. I don't
yeah,
know, so we just delivered it, and it ended up that customer like kind of never used it. Like, there were like
yeah.
very few usage requests, or that feature was, even after rolled out, it wasn't being like very successful.
Hmm.
So I think that comes down to the next part of the question that I wanted to ask you. Like,
Hmm.
how do you prioritize, and how do
Yeah.
you kind of make sure that you're solving the right problem? Because there are so
Hmm.
many problems that you might get
Yeah,
distracted into all those little problems,
yeah, yeah,
and you might not be solving the right problem. So
yeah,
how do you find the right problem to solve?
yeah. So again, very, very interesting question. It will it will often depend on the life cycle, or the stage in the life cycle where the product is in, or the
Mm,
maturity of the company's processes, right? Most of these questions about which feature to build, you should be able to start the conversation objectively, right? And
mm,
I always break it out,
yeah.
because when you go start reading a prioritization prog, they will talk about data, they will talk about measuring this, but they often forget that you are there in the real world, right?
Mm,
So start by answering the question objectively. Why are we doing this? Because this is a score that we assign to it. This
mm,
is somewhere where we can start an objective conversation, and always layer in the subjectivity, right? You can layer in the subjectivity because the engineering team thinks that if in this cycle they are low on the user impacting feature count, but they are higher on the plumbing,
mhm.
the kind of the platform piece of it, it will allow them to be faster in the future, right?
Yeah.
So you remain open to those kind of things, right? You remain open, to those kind of suggestions.
Mm,
But but let me also tell you that you also have to layer in more subjectivity. More subjectivity is, a senior leader said, this is very important to me. I promised this to one of the clients. I was at a conference and I told them that this will be coming in the next release, right?
yeah.
So you have objectivity in terms of your scores, you have
Mm,
objectivity in terms of what your data tells you, then you have slightly more subjective but still objective platform technical debt kind of things, or you just
mm,
have just subjective things because somebody wanted to do it, and it's and I hate to say this, but it is often easier to do it than it is to argue. So
yeah.
you end up doing it, right? I mean, stand true to your skill, don't do that every time, but sometimes to win a relation, you give up a yard to win back 10 yards later,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I would say. Now, specifically in terms of prioritization, for those who of you who are interested, with young organizations, when you don't have a lot of data, right, you could be looking at a Moscow framework, which is really must do, right? The must haves,
Hmm.
right? The could haves, or the must haves, the should haves, the could haves, and the won't haves, right?
Yeah.
What features are a must, right?
Yeah.
So, a technical pipeline, a database of storing data, all of these are must haves, right? The
Mm,
should haves are a way of logging in. Now, it may not be the most efficient. It may not support 2FA from the word go. Most of them do if you integrate with an Okta or anything, but
yeah.
those are should haves, right?
Yeah.
And the could haves are, if you had more resources, you may be wanting to build those. And the won't haves
Mm,
are, I will not have them in a version 1.1 or a version 0 or a 1.0 or a 0.1, right?
mm,
I mean, depending on how you define your versioning.
yeah.
Another way when your organization becomes more mature is you talk about the reach, how many customers will it reach, what's the impact, right? What's the confidence that you will have the impact, and what's the effort. Now let's layer in the JK Rowling example that you talked about. This is one customer, but it will allow you to reach 100,000 users, right? Or a
Mm.
million users. Already the reach is very high. The dollar impact, right, is also going to be very high. The dollar impact, the euro impact, the rupee impact, define your currency,
Yeah.
is also going to be very high. What is the confidence? They are telling you directly, right? And
Mm.
you, as a mature organization, you have been measuring that, and I talked about that, your vignette about that one feature that somebody built it, but they couldn't probably justify it. They couldn't
Yeah.
probably justify the confidence that so many of our users will use it,
Yeah.
and they're divided by the effort, right? So that stands for RICE. So reach, impact, confidence divided by the effort.
Mm.
More mature organizations calculate the RICE score, right? So often that RICE score will help you start that objective discussion.
Mm.
Some other organizations, and I don't mean you can read these in a blog, but the trick is to see which of these will better apply to your context, which of these will better apply to your maturity, your processes, and how best your processes can support these prioritization frameworks,
Yeah.
right? Even if you don't have a framework, right, always problem will it solve for the user? Why are we doing it? Because it solves such and such problem for the user,
Mm.
and what business impact, what sustainable business impact it is going to have, right? The
Yeah.
two first principles that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So with the JK Rowling example, just because of reach, impact and confidence, we know that it's going to happen. And the effort, I don't know how big it was. If it was going to take your entire engineering team for one quarter, probably it doesn't justify it.
Yeah.
But if it was like a sizable effort, of course, it would get a higher score. It would get a higher RICE score, and your team would take it up,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think as always the answer it depends, because
it
it
depends.
depends on
Yeah,
the use case, it depends on the
yeah,
impact. So I
yes,
think you really like gave like a very like crisp answer with lots of like insights and
yeah.
details, which were very apt for answering that question, and you added a lot of
Yeah.
value. So before we end this discussion, I want to ask
Hmm.
like one last question, but there are two parts to it. So
Yes, yes,
once we work on a product, how do we measure the success, right? Like, what are the key indicators that we say, okay, we have built a great product and it is
hmm,
successful, and where should we stop? Like, is it? I think it's a continuous journey, but
hmm,
where should we say that okay, now we are successful and we can take more risks, and we can be
yeah,
a little bit more relaxed, and when do we reach that stage? And the second
yeah,
question is more like, from your personal experience, what are
hmm,
like some examples of like great technical products or software products that you
yeah,
think they're really like well designed and well built and really
yeah,
successful, and why they
yeah.
were successful?
Okay, okay. So, in terms of the products which are successful, let me answer the second question first.
Yeah.
My favorite products are the ones which get the job done. They
Mm.
wanted to do something, they get it done,
Yeah.
and all of the complexity is hidden away for the user. They work. They have less friction.
Mm.
One of my smaller examples is Otter.ai, right? So
Mm.
often I'm in a conversation, I'm in a meeting, and I need to take transcripts, or I write notes, and often I can't talk and write at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'll use Otter AI, right? Plugs in, you're off the ground running with just your Google ID or one of the other IDs that it supports. You sign up. The sign up is very elegant,
Yeah.
and then it just works. All of the AI and the complexity is hidden away from you.
Mm.
It just works, right? They
Yeah.
reduce the friction. A similar example is Calendly, right? Calendly Everyone knows how to present their calendar. Some tools try to tie calendars together. Calendly does all of that well, and it does
Mm.
it without friction. So that's why I love it. A slightly more bigger product, it's become more bigger now, but still the elegance is still there, is WhatsApp, right?
Mm.
Compare it to Facebook. Like out of the same stable, if I log it to Facebook 20 days later, I often lose my way because
Mm.
something new will have come up. They will have a different way of doing it. I'm going to miss something. But
Yeah.
remember WhatsApp. If you compare WhatsApp to what it was 5 years ago, a lot more features have been built in, but it doesn't detract away or it doesn't distract the user from the basic elegance of sending a message and having somebody receive it or
Mm.
participating with a group of friends or community, right? And just doing it elegantly,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I love them, because the best products will solve the problem, will do what they were intended to do, will do it elegantly, will
Mm.
hide the complexity, and then they will just work, right? I
Mm.
mean, WhatsApp has had blips, Calendly has had blips, but more often than not, they will work, right? And
Yeah.
that is incredibly tough. That's an incredibly tough engineering problem to solve, having that very high tough time. But you don't hear about it
Yeah.
because all of that hard work went on in the back end, right? It should be
Mm.
transparent to the user,
Yeah.
right? Now about metrics, we could again spend another podcast on it, right?
Yeah.
There is no one right way,
Mm.
but good product managers, for good product managers, metrics will always be a forethought. It will never be an afterthought. Even in some of the newest products, and right now I'm working with just like a proof of concept. I'm helping a friend of mine, do a proof of concept.
Mm.
Even with that, I am telling them measure. How will you measure? Even if you don't put in a smart analytics suite, a product analytics suite, an amplitude, or a heap, or whatever you have,
Mm.
how will you know that you were successful? And you do that when you are defining what's the problem that you're going to solve,
Yeah.
right? You're building something for somebody. You want to have people talk to each other, right? You
Yeah.
want to have people send a message, right? WhatsApp wanted people to send messages even before calling and everything was a thing.
Mm.
How are they going to measure success? By successfully delivered messages, by successfully read messages, right? Interactions, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they didn't care about, you'll often hear about vanity metrics, daily active users, monthly active users, users logging in, retention. All of that is fine, but according to me, if there is one thing that every product needs to have is the task accomplishment. What is the problem that I wanted to solve? Did I solve that? And
Yeah.
then there'll be so many of the other metrics, that you could build around that. Again, depending on the maturity in the product life cycle, do you have the money to spring for a product suite? Do you have the engineers to be able to integrate that, right?
Yeah.
When there is a startup, measure some of the things, right?
Mm.
I mean, Avinash Kaushik, one of the people I whose blog I follow in terms of metrics and web analytics and so on, just talks about acquisition, right? Activation and retention, right?
Mm.
Or just activation, engagement, and retention.
Mm.
How are you getting your users? How are they engaging with your product? And are they likely to come back? Right? So keep it very, very simple. Keep it to begin with, keep it very, very simple, and then you can, like layer in so many of the other frameworks. However, let me reel this back in. All of what I said, let me reel this back in. Measurement cannot be an afterthought.
Mm.
Measurement always has to be one of the primary things that you do as a product manager when you decide what needs to get built, and how would you know that you were successful, right?
Yeah.
Always important to decide that. Even if it is putting pen to paper and I put this in front of 10 users, I wasn't able to measure in the software, but I am taking notes. 10 users, what do you have to say about the product? That's still some sort of measurement, right? You always should be doing that. It will evolve over the product's life cycle,
Mm.
and also focus on task accomplishment, right? I set out to solve a problem. How would I know whether that problem was solved? Some companies call it the North Star metric, but it often isn't enough, right? I personally have grown to be less of a fan of the one single metric because it doesn't tell you about the complexity, it often doesn't give you levers that you can impact to impact that one North Star metric. So
Hmm.
always talk about task accomplishment, and also extremely important to measure, it has to be a forethought.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that was like a very clear answer, and I think
yeah,
it will definitely clear a lot of doubts, in developers' minds and product
yeah,
managers, like how do we
yeah,
measure. So
yeah,
I really enjoyed our conversation,
yeah,
and I think
yeah,
it's always great to talk to you because you talk with a lot of passion, and it's so
yeah,
clear that you love product management. And
yeah, yeah,
as you said, we can go on and on,
yeah,
and this topic is so vast, and so there are so many open questions and so many
yeah,
confusions that
yeah,
we can probably have like another session of this
yeah,
podcast and talk more about
yeah,
different topics. But I
yeah,
really thank you for like
yeah,
coming up to the podcast and answering all those questions. I think it will add a lot of value for developers who think
yeah,
that product mindset is not for us, product management is
yeah,
not for us, and
yeah,
product managers who want to be really like successful in their career and take the next step.
yeah,
So
yeah,
thank you so much, and I really appreciate all the
yeah,
answers that you have given and your time.
yeah. And thank you, Kevalia, for having me.
Mhm.
We could do another of these, right? So, in the spirit of product management, and this in the spirit of of the principle that we last talked about, measurement. What I would request the audience to do is, in comments on Cavalier's podcast, let us know if you found this useful. Right? If you found my examples of what we talked about,
Yeah,
Cavalier, cultivated or shepherded some great questions, right? I found those to be very relevant. I found those to touch on all principles of product management.
yeah,
What do you have to think, right? How did you enjoy this? I mean, if you were to give us a rating on a scale of 1 to 5, how did you find it? So,
yeah,
we would love to hear your comments. We would love to hear if there is a topic that you would like us to talk further about. We would be happy to
absolutely.
do that. So,
Awesome.
Kevalia, again, thank you. Thank you for, having me, and thank you for, sharing my 2 cents.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah. Thank you.